Your entire life, you've been trained to seek permission for your worth. To hand over the keys to your value to bosses who don't see you, partners who can't define you, and strangers whose opinions you've magnified into gods. You've become addicted to the dopamine hit of external validation. Likes, praises, and recognition, not realizing this addiction has made you a hostage to forces beyond your control. Every time you refresh that post checking for comments, every moment you adjust your life to earn approval, every decision warped by the question, what will they think? You're surrendering your power. Today, I'm going to show you how to take it back by mastering the art of self-validation, because the moment you stop seeking approval is the moment you start truly living. Self-validation is the most misunderstood power we possess. Most people think it's about pumping yourself up with empty compliments, or pretending external opinions don't matter. That's not just wrong, it's dangerously misleading. True self-validation isn't blind self-congratulation. It's not narcissism disguised as self-care. It's the radical act of becoming your own authority, of defining your worth through internal metrics rather than external reactions. It's about building such a solid foundation within yourself that outside opinions can inform you without defining you. Today, we're dismantling the approval addiction that's kept you chained to external validation and rebuilding a system where you become the primary source of your own worth. Most people don't realize they're addicted to external validation until they're deep in withdrawal. The compulsive checking of social media for responses. The crushing disappointment when recognition doesn't come. The way your mood rises and falls based on how others receive your work, your appearance, your ideas. This isn't just a habit, it's neurochemical dependency. When you receive external validation, your brain releases dopamine, the same neurotransmitter triggered by addictive substances. Over time, your brain rewires itself to crave this external approval, creating a dependency more powerful than most realize. The first step in breaking any addiction is recognizing it exists. Start noticing your validation-seeking behaviors. How often do you check for responses after posting something? How much does your confidence fluctuate based on others' reactions? How frequently do you adjust your authentic expression to maximize approval? Pay attention to the physical sensations that accompany this craving, the tightness in your chest when validation is withheld, the momentary high when it arrives, the inevitable crash when it fades. These sensations aren't imaginary, they're withdrawal symptoms from a very real dependency. This addiction didn't develop by accident. From early childhood, you were conditioned to seek external approval. Your worth was measured by grades, by compliments, by comparisons to others. This conditioning created neural pathways that automatically equate external validation with survival, making approval feel like a necessity rather than a preference. Understanding this isn't just psychological insight, it's liberation. When you recognize that your craving for validation is a conditioned response rather than a reflection of reality, you create the space needed to begin rewiring these patterns. Every decision you make, every emotion you feel about yourself, stems from a value system. A complex matrix of beliefs about what makes something, or someone, worthwhile. Most people never examine these value systems, they simply inherit them from parents, peers, media, and culture. This unconscious adoption creates a devastating problem. You're living by value systems you didn't consciously choose. Measuring yourself against standards you never agreed to. Chasing validation based on metrics you may not actually believe in. Take a moment to reflect. What makes you feel valuable right now? Is it productivity? Appearance? Intelligence? Wealth? Relationship status? Now ask yourself the critical question, did you consciously choose these metrics, or were they installed in you by external forces? Most people discover something shocking: the standards by which they judge themselves aren't their own. They're living by someone else's definition of success, someone else's measure of worth. They're seeking validation based on values they've never critically examined. To master self-validation, you must become the conscious architect of your own value system. This begins by identifying what genuinely matters to you, not what you've been told should matter. Ask yourself, if no one would ever know, what would still be important to you? What qualities would you still strive to embody? What achievements would still feel meaningful? What principles would you still uphold? Your answers reveal your authentic value system, the foundation upon which genuine self-validation must be built. Because you cannot validate yourself against standards you don't truly believe in. You cannot fill a void with values that don't resonate with your deepest self. The moment you clarify your authentic values, you establish the metrics by which you'll measure your worth, independent of external opinion or societal pressure. This is sovereignty. Self-validation isn't just a mindset, it's a practice. A daily ritual as essential as eating or sleeping. Without consistent practice, even the strongest commitment to self-validation will erode under the constant pressure of a validation-obsessed culture. Begin by establishing a concrete self-validation ritual that occurs at the same time daily, ideally in the morning before external influences flood in. This ritual should include 3 key components. First, recognition of effort rather than outcome. Each morning, acknowledge one thing you're genuinely trying at, regardless of results. The attempt itself becomes worthy of validation. This breaks the toxic pattern of only validating yourself when you succeed by external metrics. Second, alignment acknowledgement. Identify one way your actions in the previous day aligned with your authentic values, not society's values. Not your parents' values. Not social media's values. But the values you consciously chose in the previous exercise. This reinforces your commitment to internal metrics over external ones. Third, rejection processing. Recall one rejection, criticism, or validation withholding experience from the previous day. Rather than suppressing or obsessing over it, consciously separate the information it provides from the validation it withholds. Ask, what useful information exists here, independent of the validation I sought? These rituals are deliberate neurological reprogramming. Each time you practice them, you're creating new neural pathways that reduce dependency on external validation and strengthen your capacity for self-validation. Consistency is crucial. A ritual practiced intensely once has far less impact than one practiced moderately every single day. Neurological rewiring requires repetition. The daily reinforcement of new patterns until they become your default response. Remember, the world will never stop offering its opinions. Your challenge isn't to ignore these completely, it's to ensure they inform you without defining you. These daily rituals build the internal foundation that makes this possible. Rejection is the kryptonite of self-validation. A single rejection can collapse even the strongest self-concept if you haven't learned to process it effectively. Most people interpret rejection as evidence of inadequacy rather than what it usually is, misalignment. When a romantic partner rejects you, it doesn't mean you're unlovable, it means that you and this specific person aren't aligned. When a company rejects your application, it doesn't mean you're unqualified, it means your specific skills and their specific needs aren't matched. When your creative work is rejected, it doesn't mean it's worthless, it means it hasn't found the right audience. Reconceptualizing rejection as misalignment rather than inadequacy transforms it from a source of shame into a source of clarity. It becomes directional information rather than definitive judgment. This perspective shift isn't just psychological comfort, it's reality. Even the most successful people face constant rejection. J.K. Rowling's Harry Potter was rejected by 12 publishers. Stephen King's first novel received 30 rejections. These rejections weren't accurate assessments of value, they were instances of misalignment between the creator and a specific evaluator. To master rejection processing, implement this 3-step practice whenever rejection occurs. First, acknowledge the emotional impact without judgment. Allow yourself to feel the disappointment, hurt, or frustration without attaching a narrative about what it means about you. Second, extract the usable information. Ask, what specific feedback, if any, might help me refine my approach? Separate potentially useful guidance from subjective opinion or personal preference. Third, reconnect with your internal metrics. Remind yourself, this specific person/organization didn't validate me, but their metrics aren't mine. By my authentic values, where do I stand? This practice ensures rejection informs you without defining you. It transforms what would be emotional debris into navigational data. What derails most people propels you forward. Your environment either reinforces or undermines your commitment to self-validation. Most people attempt to build self-validation while remaining embedded in life structures that constantly trigger validation addiction. To truly master self-validation, you must intentionally restructure your environment to support internal validation over external approval seeking. This isn't about becoming a hermit, it's about creating boundaries and systems that protect your self-concept from constant external evaluation. Start by auditing your digital environment. Which platforms, accounts, or interactions consistently trigger validation-seeking behaviors? Where do you find yourself comparing, adjusting, or performing for approval? These aren't just harmless habits, they're validation addiction triggers that require boundary setting. Consider implementing validation-free zones in your day. Specific periods where you create without sharing, achieve without announcing, or experience without documenting for others' consumption. These zones strengthen your capacity to value experiences, independent of others' acknowledgement that they occurred. Examine your relationship patterns. Have you surrounded yourself with people who validate you only conditionally? When you meet their expectations, match their preferences, or fulfill their needs? Or have you cultivated relationships with those who recognize your intrinsic worth, independent of performance? Most crucially, restructure your approach to creativity and contribution. Many people have become incapable of creating, without simultaneously seeking validation for that creation. They can't write without immediately publishing. Can't achieve without immediately announcing. Can't develop a skill without constantly performing it for evaluation. Break this pattern by establishing private practice in all areas of importance. Create work you don't share. Develop skills you don't demonstrate. Achieve goals you don't announce. This builds the neurological pathways that connect creation to internal satisfaction, rather than external validation. This restructuring is intentional. It's ensuring that when you do engage with external feedback, you do so from a position of choice, rather than dependency. External validation becomes a potential bonus, rather than a desperate need. Mastering self-validation isn't an overnight transformation. It's a practice, a journey, a constant recommitment to being your own authority, in a world desperate to claim that role. Each time you catch yourself seeking external approval, each time you consciously redirect to your internal metrics, each time you process rejection as information rather than indictment, you strengthen the neural pathways of self-validation. You reclaim a bit more of your sovereignty. The paradox of self-validation is that once you truly master it, external validation often increases. When you no longer desperately need others' approval, you show up with an authenticity that naturally attracts it. When you create from internal alignment, rather than anticipated reaction, your work resonates more deeply. When you love yourself independent of others' assessment, you become magnetic. But by then, something remarkable has happened. The validation no longer defines you. It no longer determines your worth. It's simply an acknowledgement of what you already know to be true. This is freedom. Not freedom from others' opinions, they'll always exist. But freedom from being hostage to those opinions. Freedom to be informed without being defined. Freedom to receive without needing. Freedom to connect without depending. Start today. Begin noticing your validation-seeking behaviors. Clarify your authentic values. Establish your daily self-validation ritual. Practice processing rejection as redirection. Restructure your environment to support internal validation. The world will never stop offering its judgments. Your power lies not in silencing them, but in deciding how much authority they hold. Choose today to become your own highest authority. Your future self is waiting on the other side of that choice. If this message resonated with you, hit subscribe to join our community, dedicated to authentic growth. Share in the comments one area where you'll start practicing self-validation today. I read every comment and would love to hear your insights. Remember, your worth isn't waiting for someone else's recognition. It's waiting for your own.